Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. Going to react to the Broncos' loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers 26-21. And Benjamin, in this game, there are a lot of different variables. Of course, the injuries played a huge factor. We'll get into that coming up in just a little bit. Also, there were some positives. It's amazing in losses sometimes. We can have a nuanced conversation about these things. But overall, what were some of your takeaways from this game? You thought the Broncos had a really good shot at winning based on the way that things shook out in the game. Did it play out more or less without the injuries, similar to the way you thought it would?
No, that game in no way went how I thought it was going to go. But, that's the beauty of football is we can have all these preconceived expectations and then not have it happen the way we drew it up. I did think the Broncos had a really good chance of winning that game. In fact, I was talking with you before the game, and I was looking around. I'm like, I feel weird because I'm the only guy in the market predicting a win here. I thought they matched up pretty well. I understand that Pittsburgh was going to blitz all night, and all that kind of stuff, but you had a quarterback in Drew Lock who slips the blitz pretty well. He does do that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, he got hurt early. You had to turn to Jeff Driscoll, and Driscoll found a way to keep him competitive. I mean, we were talking about a game-winning drive inside of 2 minutes. They just, again, unable to execute late. And that's one of those things as you're building a football team. You go from losing big to losing small to winning big. The Broncos are kind of in that lose small, win small. They're trying to get over the hump as far as that goes. And I think you have a team that, when healthy, has the pieces to be able to do it, but the margins are just so thin. If you make mistakes, it's tough to overcome them. And
it felt like in this game when you had to lean on some of your younger players a little bit more than I think we all expected. I mean, KJ Hamler was making his debut, and he ended up with 3 catches for 48 yards on 7 targets. I mean, I didn't expect KJ Hamler to have a game like that, and they were targeting him even deep. I mean, they went after him throughout the course of the game, especially once Cortland went down. Michael Ojemudia had 10 targets on him. You knew that Ben Roethlisberger would pick on the young guys in the secondary, but you just didn't know to what extent, and he obviously got tested. So this seemed like, to me, a little bit of a reminder about really how young this team ultimately is at multiple positions.
Yeah, it really is. It's a growing team that's trying to work its way up. I mean, I've seen around town, you get some of these disingenuous comparisons to previous head coaches, things like that. And, you gotta set that aside. This is a new era. Vic Fangio era is, 16, 17, 18 games in. Let's have a little patience. And I know that's tough to say. When you've gone through a few years of kind of being down. But, it's a different coach, a different mindset. They're trying to do some different things. And I think there are positives to take away. I think there are bright spots. But right now it's very young, and there are going to be mistakes. We've talked about this ad nauseum. There's going to be moments where you're just looking like, in terms of execution, drop passes, Jerry Jeudy against the Titans. And Nick Vedette had a couple of ish drops, I believe, against the Steelers, and Ojemudia letting a guy by him and looking to the ref for the flag instead of continuing to play through the whistle. I think that there are going to be moments like that, and as these guys grow and mature, as long as they learn from that, that's good. This is a team with an upward trajectory, and that's what's important to remember.
One of the things that I took out of this game, something I was pounding the table for throughout the course of the week last week, was getting more pressure on the quarterback. They actually took a step back in that. They had only 9 pressures on the quarterback. They got 5 hurries and 3 hits. With the injury to Draymond Jones, and we'll get into some more injury stuff here in a little bit, DeMarcus Walker also banged up. Where do you go from here to generate more pressure? You're not going to get Von Miller back. So you're not it's not like all of a sudden you're going to change who you have going out there. Maybe with the addition of McTelvin Agim, maybe it changes a little bit. But in the end, you kind of have to be what you are. And right now you're a team that's not really setting up the rest of the back end of the defense for success because you're not getting the requisite pressure.
You got to talk to the guys that are out there playing, because Vic's not going to suddenly change the way that he's played football for 40 years or coached football for 40 years. He blitzed a little more in that game against Tennessee than he normally does, and you may have to do that a little bit more. You got to kind of pick your spots, but I think you just need to demand excellence out of the guys that are out there. Like, look, hey, this is your shot. You need to remind those guys. Remind guys like Jeremiah Tachu and Malik Reed, Agim, who's a young guy coming up, Shelby, who's playing for a contract, those kinds of things. You need to remind, hey, look, you're playing for this is it. This is your moment to shine. We don't have Von. Yeah, Bradley's been not been 100%, but this is your opportunity to make this statement. This is your opportunity to show everybody else what you were. And can you get home or not? And set that challenge to them. Set the challenge in front of those guys and say, look, can you get there or not? Can you do this for me or not? Because if you can't, I appreciate you trying. I'll find someone who will.
I want to say for this game that there's plenty of reasons to be frustrated. You don't like to excuse away losses, and I don't think that the Broncos as professional athletes or the coaching staff as professionals are going to excuse away losses. Every team is dealing with injuries. A lot of teams are dealing with injuries, but you do have to find a way to keep competing. Now, the Broncos have, last 2 weeks, really shown that. I feel like when you lose to 2 playoff teams close, you can feel, even in a non-orange slices conversation, you can feel as though you're saying that there was some growth. But in the end, they are going to be judged on wins and losses. So in the midst of all the injuries, where do you go from here? What are you trying to learn over the next couple of weeks?
I think you try to learn what you have with some of these young guys. You like the way you project them, but you want to put them out there. You know, it's you always like your kid to be able to swim, but you got to throw him in the pool to see if he can do it. And I think that's where we're at with his team. You don't want to take a moral victories approach to it. I don't think anybody's doing that. I mean, the radio, you know how hot take radio guy is, and they'll say all that kind of stuff, but. You don't want to take that approach to it. I think what you want to do, though, is take the positives out of things that there are to take and use that to motivate you to continue to get better. The positive motivation here is you lost to 2 teams that are probably going to win their divisions and be in the playoffs by a combined 7 points. The sky is not falling. You are not the Miami Dolphins last year. You know, you're the Denver Broncos. You're playing tough, and that's part of the battle. Now you need to work on executing things just a little bit better. The coaching staff, missing the timeout in week 1, the players with drop passes here or there. You basically just need to execute better. You need to do things better. And so you've built the foundation. Now let's improve on it and continue to move forward. Don't give up on what you're doing simply because you got in two weeks and it wasn't perfect.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about some of the other teams. I think that there's some perspective here. I mean, you're not the New York Jets and all the things that are going on there. Right. You're not the Minnesota Vikings, who really expected to be a team contending for things this year, and they were thoroughly embarrassed yesterday in their matchup. So, I mean, you're 0-2, but not all 0-2s are created equal.
I agreed. And I hate that Bill Parcells quote that you are what your record says you are, because it's literally nothing could be further from the truth in football. Ball bounces the wrong way. You got a guy out 1 week, he's back the next. That quote is absolutely so mind-bogglingly wrong that I don't know why Bill Parcells would have even uttered it. But if you're the Denver Broncos, here's a bright spot for you. At least you didn't pay Kirk Cousins 4 years fully guaranteed for the performance the Vikings have gotten out of him so far.
Yeah, they were thoroughly thrashed, and that is definitely a game that they're going to be looking at the tape wondering about how they bounce back when they lose to the Colts like they did. But again, final thoughts here on just an overall look for the Broncos coming out of this game. We'll get into some perspective on it a little later on, plus injuries. In the moment here for the Broncos, you're heading into a game against Tampa Bay later on this week. They're seemingly clicking on all cylinders, but you are home, and you do have the benefit of knowing where you're at as a team. How do you think they're going to respond?
I think that's the challenge. I think you scrap the first 2 games, or you don't necessarily scrap it, but you scrap it from a mentality standpoint. You say, look, we don't need to do the season hangs into the balance. We need to do this game hangs in the balance. Let's win 1 game and worry about the rest of it as it comes. And I think that's, if you can dial the focus back, bring all the things back to center and say, look, we got a Hall of Fame quarterback coming in. We got a great defense coming in. We need to do what we can to stop them. If we can prove that to ourselves and get a win, then we can move on to the next week and pick up another win. And the next thing you know, that snowball gets bigger as it rolls downhill.